Today on Notsam Wrestling, Drew McIntyre enters into that elite conversation of professional wrestlers in the world. Who will main event Monday Night Raw on Netflix? SmackDown going 3 hours, and is Shawn Michaels gonna wrestle again? This is Notsam Wrestling. Welcome to Notsam Wrestling. I hope you're in the midst. I hope it's already started. I hope it's going to be a great week. I hope it is a great week. I hope you got some time off work. I hope everything is working out right for you. You're spending some time with the family, but still taking just a little bit of time out of your day to appreciate what's going on right now in the world of professional wrestling. Because as we look at these holiday-themed shows on both WWE and AEW's side, there was a time when this holiday week would start and the current product, it would be something that you could kind of watch and chuckle at, watch and enjoy, but it was almost like storylines were put on pause. You know, I mean, I remember like Alberto Del Rio kind of like turned babyface on Raw, and then the next week it was the Christmas Raw, so he ran Santa over with his car, and it was almost like, don't even worry about what's going on this week. We're just doing a Christmas show. Now, you know, you get Braun Strowman in a Santa hat, you get an acknowledgement of the fact that the holidays are here, but there are too many stories to tell and too much going on to take a week off. So that leaves us here at Notsam Wrestling in the exact same position. We can't take a week off because look at everything that's going on. Of course, we hit that emergency podcast midweek last week to react to everything that went on the Netflix Raw kickoff, the press conference that they did at WWE HQ. But I do want to start. You know, to me, Drew McIntyre this week is showing what level he's playing on. But before we get to Drew McIntyre, let's get to how SmackDown began. And that was with Solo Sikoa. Solo Sikoa shifting back into swaggy Solo, but he's still kind of scary Solo as well. He's becoming scary, swaggy Solo, and it's really impressive, the command that he has developed of the audience. This is a guy, not only, a lot of people are going, man, he's improved a lot since April. You know, April, I wasn't sure about what was going on, but now he's playing on a different level. And that's true. But I think you also have to take into account that this guy he's a young guy. And just a few years ago, he had no experience, and now he's holding the audience in the palm of his hand like very few performers have the ability to do. Maybe it's a little trial by fire. Maybe it's one of those sink or swim scenarios where it's like, Solo, we're going to pull you up pretty quickly from NXT, and we're going to throw you right into the Bloodline. And everywhere that you go, you're going to be around Roman Reigns, and you're going to be around the Usos. And maybe most importantly, you're going to be around Paul Heyman. And these superstars are there for you to collect knowledge from, collect information from, collect advice from. And hopefully you'll be able to find yourself at a rate that accelerated isn't even the right word for it. It's going so fast. And I think that's where we're at with Solo Sikoa going in and immediately the fact that he refers to the promo that Roman Reigns cut about, you know, tribal combat. When he says, you're talking in front of your little boat, just like, you know, when we're watching, we're going, man, look how well Roman Reigns is doing for himself. He's got himself a boat. He's standing at the dock. He's got the wise man behind him. You remember last week I was describing this promo and I specifically brought up the boat. But the minute you refer to a boat as your little boat, it's almost like you're a child and this is your toy. It's almost like now it's Roman Reigns and he's getting into the bathtub and bringing his little boat with him. Look, here comes the boat. Stand in front of your little boat. He said it twice, your little boat. And I'm like, oh. Solo immediately takes the steam out of it and brings it right back to him. Then the crowd starts whatting him. And Solo completely leans into the whats. He's aware of where he's at. First, he changes his cadence so that the whats are actually effective. Instead of going like, don't what me, which is, you know, that's the first step. When you're first kind of learning how to deal with a crowd that's not going your way, that would be your response. Don't what me. But Solo starts taking pauses. So the whats actually accentuate the things that he's saying. And then when it's time to like realize that we're not on the same page here, get a little heat for himself, He says, everybody's saying, what? You need to acknowledge me. Then he does it again. He's playing with the what's again. Jimmy Uso, what? Jey Uso, what? And then when it's time for him to really deliver his message, go back and watch that promo from SmackDown. He starts changing his cadence. And going back, Stone Cold Steve Austin has addressed this in multiple interviews. I remember I interviewed Stone Cold. Maybe he was promoting 2K15. Maybe it was 10 years ago. Maybe more. Who knows? And I brought up the what chance then. And he said then, and he said in many interviews many times since, the trick is to not let them have it. That if you don't want what's to be thrown into your promos, don't leave rhythmic spaces to make yourself more comfortable with your pattern of speech. If you don't talk like this when you cut a promo, there won't be gaps for people to say, and I'm sure you've been saying what as I've been talking. And that can be a much more difficult thing to do when you're actually in the ring, knowing that you're on live television in front of millions of people, in an arena with tens of thousands of people surrounding you. But Solo Sikoa first leans into the what's and then quickly changes his speech pattern so that those gaps aren't there anymore, or they're shorter, you know? So you want to challenge me? You want to challenge me to a world title match? Well, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. See, those little, so you can't go, there's no space. There might be space for one what, but nobody wants to do one what. They want to repeatedly do it. Solo takes control again. And it's amazing seeing somebody who's not only good at conveying this message with his words, because also you look at the Bloodline, and Solo went from being the guy in the Bloodline who speaks to being the only guy, or Solo went from being the guy in the Bloodline who doesn't speak to being the only guy in the Bloodline who speaks. You've got Tama Tonga, who will give you a shh. Yeah. You got Jacob Fatu that'll hit you with a
I love you, Solo!
But when it comes time to tell the story with words, Solo Sikoa is on an island. And he really has made the most of it. So he accepts Roman Reigns' challenge for tribal combat. He doesn't seem worried about it. He says once again, you leave your bloodline at home, I'll leave my bloodline at home, and we'll be good. Now, of course, do we believe this? No, we do not believe this at all. This has been said many times. There will be no bloodline. There always is a bloodline. There is no leaving the bloodline at home. First of all, because it wouldn't make sense in terms of strategy. Second of all, because this is how you travel. You always travel in an entourage. And third of all, you think Jacob Fatu, Tama Tonga, the Usos, Sami Zayn, you think any of them are missing the premiere of Raw on Netflix? I don't think so. Hey, Jacob. Yeah, no. This is like the biggest show WWE has done in a long time. This is the show that they've been hyping as putting everybody on the next level. You can watch. Here's my Netflix password. I don't think so. I think Jacob will probably be in the building. Now, there were rumors that were going all over the place, and this is not the show for that. If you want, there are plenty of YouTube channels, there are plenty of podcasts that will get into any little, the minute something pops up as a Facebook post with an infographic that says WWE has been discussing, and there's no credit to a source. The further back you search this information, the further back you're just seeing posts about posts about posts about posts, which is why we normally don't get into the stuff on this show, because more often than not, it's either wrong or half true or whatever it is. But this week's post of a post of a post of a post was that they were considering making the Tribal Chief Championship an actual championship, that the Ulafala wouldn't be enough, that they would design a championship belt that would be awarded to the Tribal Chief. And on paper, I would go why would the Tribal Chief need a championship title? They would have an Ulafala. It's like a thing. It's a real thing based on culture and tradition and stuff. Other than, number one, maybe they want to sell some replica titles, and number two, maybe who's ever holding that title is going to go title for title with the People's Championship title that The Rock holds. I mean, I get it. UFC has the BMF championship, which doesn't actually mean anything, but it's a thing that gets added in. Look, what do I think of it? I don't think of it. I'll think of it if it becomes a thing, then I'll think of it, and I'll think of it how it gets executed on television. Right? Am I gonna what do I think of it based on unsubstantiated infographics on Facebook? I don't. What will I think of it in use? I don't know. Let's see if it's actually a thing or just something on Facebook infographics. But I do think that it's interesting that in the beginning, it felt like The Rock had a huge possibility of interfering in this tribal combat match. And I think that he still does. But now Drew McIntyre, I think, is just as likely, if not more likely, to either also or instead of, as well as or instead of The Rock, interfere in this match that's going to happen on the Netflix Raw. Drew McIntyre, I love what's happening with Drew McIntyre right now. So, as we speculated, wildly, by the way, here on Notsam Wrestling, we said, if everything counts, and we live in a world where we watch the product, we speculate wildly, and everything counts, then when Drew McIntyre left Saturday night's main event after beating Sami Zayn and said 1 down, 4 to go, I said 4th has to be Solo Sikoa. I think that was basically confirmed on SmackDown. Solo Sikoa is in the ring. He's cutting his promo, and here comes Drew McIntyre. Drew McIntyre confronts Solo Sikoa, and he does it. I mean, it's just great. When he said, I bet you're wondering, are you staying up at night wondering, when is Drew McIntyre going to come for me? See, there's something really cool about the era that we're in now, that there are some stories and some performers where logic trumps traditional pro wrestling storytelling, in the sense that Drew McIntyre, who is a villain, he's in the villains column. If there's heroes and there's villains, Drew McIntyre is in the villains column. Sami Zayn, CM Punk, Jey Uso, heroes. Drew McIntyre doesn't get along with them, makes him a villain. But in Drew McIntyre as a character, he's not looking at columns. He's not thinking about heroes and villains. He's not part of a storyline. We're supposed to believe, or at least fall into the suspension of disbelief, that Drew has a real bone to pick with these people that he's attacking. And if that is the case, then he should have a bone to pick with Solo Sikoa. And many times in this world of professional wrestling, we've gotten, yeah, but like he's a bad guy now. So since Drew McIntyre is a bad guy now, he's just going to go after the good guys. Drew McIntyre has a real problem with the people who were in the original bloodline that are good guys now. If they're bad guys, Drew McIntyre's a bad guy too, so it doesn't matter. It doesn't work anymore, right? We're too familiar with the tropes of professional wrestling, and we want to be taken with a degree of intelligence, you know? I think when the Attitude Era popped up, it was, Vince McMahon saying, good guys and bad guys, shades of gray. We're not going to insult your intelligence anymore, was what the thing was. And the way they did that was they made it an edgier product, and they made it so that the heroes and villains were kind of blurred. Basically, they just switched them, right? That the traditional heroes, which would be like Kurt Angle, became the villains, and the traditional villains, which would be like Stone Cold Steve Austin, became the heroes. That was what they did, and that was what the culture wanted at the time. That was what the audience wanted at the time. You can't just rinse and repeat if you want to have that same sort of revolutionary feel to the way pro wrestling is presented. Instead, you have what you've got now, which is storytelling that's a little bit more complex, that's a little bit more detailed, that's a little bit more thoughtful, that's based on real human interactions, that's based on real human emotion, and that plays into the idea that everybody that's watching knows what's going on. Everybody that's watching can get on Reddit or Twitter or Facebook or any YouTube, listens to podcasts, has this knowledge of the product that goes beyond what's on the television show. So the television show actually needs to reflect everything that goes beyond the television show. And so if Drew McIntyre wants us to believe in what he's selling, then Drew can't just go, I'm after good guys because I'm a bad guy. Drew has to go, here is the logical basis for my story. And if you can give us a logical basis to a character, we can follow that character. And that's what we're getting with this version of Drew McIntyre. That is the same version with CM Punk. You know, Drew McIntyre didn't go like, well, I was a good guy, but now I'm a bad guy. Drew McIntyre stayed the same, and people started cheering for CM Punk. Drew McIntyre still remains the same. Drew McIntyre is angry at the same people that he was angry at when he was in the ring with Tyson Fury singing Sweet Caroline. It's the same people. His message is delivery is a little bit different. He's a little bit harsher, but the core of the messaging is exactly the same. And so it makes you want to put faith in these characters that you're following. It makes you want to continue to watch week in and week out because you know that your intelligence isn't being insulted. You know that the fact that you're actually paying attention to the show is not being taken for granted. And that's the feeling that I get when I see Drew McIntyre come out and go solo. Of course, I want to murder you. Of course, I'm furious with you. You're the one who cost me my match. If this whole thing can be traced back to that Clash at the Castle match that I lost against Roman Reigns that was supposed to be my moment that you guys took from me, well, how did I lose that match? You interfered in it. So, of course, I'm angry at you. But, and this is important, but you're also the only member of the Bloodline that didn't go back with Roman Reigns. When Roman Reigns had the power taken away from him, everybody was gone. But then the minute he came back, everybody came back. Jimmy came back. Jay came back. Sammy came back. Solo, you're the only one that didn't come back. So we have a common goal. It wouldn't make sense for me to just take you out for no reason. We have this common goal. We want to end Roman Reigns. So Solo, you end Roman Reigns. I'll take care of Jimmy, Jay, and Sammy. You end Roman Reigns. And when we have successfully taken out all those OG Bloodline members, that's when I will come for you. Drew is telling him that, look, you're still on my list. But the fact that you did what you did, the fact that you are against Roman Reigns the same way I am, what that has given you is the privilege of being at the end of the list. Instead of being at the top of the list, like these other guys are, you're at the end of the list. Congratulations, Solo Sikoa. And Solo Sikoa accepts it because Solo is a villain. And so Solo's like, okay, I'll worry about Drew when I have to worry about Drew. That's great to know. That now I can go after Roman Reigns and I don't have to worry about having these other villains. That's not the luxury that Roman Reigns has. That's not the luxury that anyone in the Bloodline has. Everybody that is a member of the original Bloodline, they don't have that luxury. Anytime they're in a rivalry with somebody, they also know that there's a handful of superstars that they terrorized over the course of the last 4 years. They're looking for their pound of flesh. And that ain't going anywhere, and that's not going to stop. I think it's that Jimmy comes out right after that and attacks Drew and it's all good. But I think the fact that Drew now has enemies on both SmackDown and Raw when it comes to the Bloodline, the fact that when Drew came out on SmackDown, it was this feeling of Drew McIntyre. There's certain guys, right? CM Punk's a Raw superstar. Seth Rollins is a Raw superstar. Cody Rhodes is a SmackDown superstar. Drew McIntyre is a Raw superstar. But all those guys are sort of so high up there that they transcend the draft. And I know right now a lot of people are transcending the draft. Chad Gable was on SmackDown last week. You know, I understand. But in terms of even when there's the fluctuation isn't there, even when the transfer window is not open, there are certain guys that are so big that their business transcends whatever the rules of the draft are. And Drew McIntyre has officially entered into that category. What's happened with Drew McIntyre is that he had such a tremendous rivalry with CM Punk this year. You know, I said earlier this year that my 2024 MVP has to be Drew McIntyre. And as we get to the end of 2024, that remains. You can make the case for Liv Morgan, but for me, it breaks down to Drew McIntyre and Liv Morgan. Those are the two names that I will accept for MVP of 2024. And for me, it's Drew McIntyre. If for you, it's Liv Morgan, you won't get any arguments. But it's Drew McIntyre because of how much he has elevated. And that as the spotlight gets brighter and brighter and brighter, Drew McIntyre gets better and better and better. The interesting thing to me about all of this is that when Drew and Punk had their rivalry, even though Drew had other matches, right? Even though Drew and Seth had their match at WrestleMania, because let's be honest, going into WrestleMania, yes, the match was Seth Rollins and Drew McIntyre, but everybody from the Seth Rollins perspective was focused on how Seth fit into this rivalry between Cody Rhodes, Roman Reigns, and The Rock. That, yeah, he had this night 2 World Heavyweight title match, but night 1 and the main event was what it was all about. You know, Seth Rollins became the MVP of WrestleMania, and his match with Drew McIntyre was probably the third reason in a list of maybe 3. Drew McIntyre, on the other hand, even going into the Seth Rollins match, it was more about this thing that was brewing between him and CM Punk. Drew McIntyre coming off of the Royal Rumble and looking at CM Punk in the face and saying, I prayed for this and it happened, was that one moment that you realize that even though this is a World Heavyweight title match at WrestleMania, we got stuff that's even bigger percolating between both members of that match. And when Drew McIntyre tried to get the title back against Damian Priest, CM Punk interfering was the story there. And when Drew McIntyre won the Money in the Bank, it was CM Punk. Even though Drew had all these other stories going on, Drew's involvement with CM Punk was above all of them. So what you ended up having was basically from, say, February until October, Drew versus CM Punk, to me, was this story that existed on an island to an extent. That it was one of the most compelling things for me, pure story of the year, which is a lot in a year that had the Bloodline, in a year that had Rhea and Liv and Dom, in a year that had a ton of stuff. Cody Rhodes, to me, even, I mean, technically, The Rock versus Roman Reigns versus Cody, like all that was this year, and still, Drew versus Punk for me is story of the year. But it existed on its own thing. What's happened now is that Drew McIntyre changed as a performer as a result of that story. That story was so big, and Drew was so good in it, that it changed him as a performer, so that now he comes out of that story, and he's no longer in protected custody. He's in Gen Pop. And that major star Drew McIntyre in this news story as the Bloodline Hunter, as the real Craven, the Bloodline Hunter, is the Drew McIntyre that we got with CM Punk. And for the first time, the Drew McIntyre that we got with CM Punk has entered the general population of the WWE. And we see that Drew McIntyre go to war with people like Sami Zayn, having this rivalry begin with somebody like Jey Uso, going back and forth with somebody like Jimmy Uso, working his way up. But I think that was a question that at least was on my mind when it was all happening, and I would assume was on a lot of your minds too. That what happens to Drew McIntyre when this CM Punk rivalry is over? Because we had all our CM Punk dream matches already lined up. CM Punk can do whatever he wants. Coming off of Drew McIntyre, because the Drew McIntyre thing was almost a bonus. Nobody thought that Drew versus Punk would be Punk's first rivalry or that it would last a year, but it did. You always have had Punk versus Seth, Punk versus Roman, Punk versus Cody, Punk versus KO, Punk versus Gunther. That's 5. There are a million things that CM Punk could do, but Drew McIntyre, because he's CM Punk, because the minute CM Punk returns to the WWE at Survivor Series 2023, he is that guy. He is CM Punk. Top guy, tippity top CM Punk. But Drew McIntyre raised up to that level. Drew McIntyre, over the course of telling a story, had the responsibility of saying, I have to be looked at as an equal to CM Punk. And that's someplace where Drew McIntyre shines, man. That's the place that he needed to get back to. Because the last time Drew McIntyre truly had that was when he was in the ring in the Royal Rumble in 2020 with Brock Lesnar. And Brock Lesnar showed up for Drew McIntyre and laid on the ground for about 47 minutes after Drew McIntyre claymored him. But the fact is that when Drew McIntyre was face-to-face with Brock Lesnar, Drew McIntyre presented himself as an equal. He is very good at seeing himself get higher and higher and higher on the card and having the audience see him as being in the proper spot. And that's difficult for a lot of people. There are a lot of people who they get up there, and once they're up there, people go like, whoa, there's a big difference here. Whoa, they kind of know. They go, oh, this is a big deal for that person. That person, I don't think they were supposed to be here. But with Drew, you don't even say, oh, this is a big deal for Drew. Nobody was saying that. When he was fighting with CM Punk, nobody was like, oh, this is big for Drew. Because immediately you just felt like Drew was exactly where he was supposed to be. And he's come off of that bigger than ever. And now you have this guy who's going after the entire OG bloodline. And you're going, if there's one guy that could take out the full OG bloodline, it's Drew McIntyre. And that's where we're at, to the point where, as I stated a week ago, I was going, you got to, even at the press conference to an extent. Oh, you got to believe The Rock's going to show up to Netflix. You got to believe that The Rock's going to get involved in that tribal combat match. And I still think that there's a great chance of that happening. But honestly, now, it's just as much of a question, how does Drew McIntyre fit into that match? And you're going, the matches that people are talking about for WrestleMania with Roman Reigns. What's the Roman Reigns match going to be at WrestleMania? I think the two conversations that I see the most are, of course, Roman Reigns versus The Rock. Possible. Roman Reigns versus CM Punk. Possible. There's also, of course, this idea of this bloodline feud continuing on. Are you going to do Roman versus Solo for the final time at WrestleMania? Are you going to do Roman versus Jacob finally at WrestleMania? Are you going to do a third Roman versus Cody match at WrestleMania? Or at this point, does the Drew thing get so hot that Drew McIntyre versus Roman Reigns is the Roman Reigns match at WrestleMania? All of those things that I just stated could happen. I could easily see, because Drew McIntyre exists and because The Rock exists, I could easily see Solo Sikoa beating Roman Reigns on the first Raw of Netflix. Easily. Because we don't know, is this the end of the rivalry, or is this where things start to really get rolling? Do we need to see Roman Reigns in a position of dominance for what happens next? Or do we need to see Roman Reigns get down to the lowest that we've seen him since this whole bloodline thing started? Which Roman do we need for whatever's coming next? I don't know, because I don't know what's coming next. But I think both are equally likely at this point, and both scenarios are very, very easy to point to. Hey, forgive the interruption, but I have great news. You can head into 2025 not looking like me, but with an amazing head of hair. Hims can help you get the luscious locks of your dreams. You can choose from a huge range of hair loss treatments like chewable treatments, oral pills, a spray, or a serum. You can pick what will best suit your needs. Backed by doctors with clinically proven ingredients, you can get your hair growing back in as little as 3 to 6 months. The time is going to pass anyway. You might as well spend it getting incredible hair. Start your free online visit today at hims.com/notsam. That's HIMS.com/notsam for your personalized hair loss treatment options. hims.com/notsam Results vary based on studies of topical and oral minoxidil and finasteride prescription products require an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if a prescription is appropriate. Restrictions apply. See website for full details and important safety information. Then you've got the match that I think the match that we thought was going to be CM Punk's first rivalry. When CM Punk got to WWE, I mean, the first real news to break, other than the fact that CM Punk was actually back, was the way Seth Rollins reacted after he got out of the War Games cage and realized that CM Punk was back. This is a rivalry that goes beyond, the last year of CM Punk being in WWE, that goes over the course of 10 years, maybe beyond that. The Shield is coming up. Seth Rollins being brought into the WWE. And it's real simple, man. CM Punk is telling the story of somebody who idolized him and Punk having to make him realize that he's second string. That, yeah, you came up idolizing me, but I'm still here. And as good as you've gotten, you haven't gotten as good as me. You still idolize me. And Seth Rollins, and that's how he's characterizing Seth Rollins. Meanwhile, Seth Rollins is telling the story of somebody who, regardless of how popular they are today, who left the WWE and tried to take down the company every chance that he got, who left his friends and is now back. And this is key. That Seth Rollins is portraying CM Punk as a guy who has come back to the company that he unsuccessfully tried to take down and is taking advantage of the work that Seth and other people did to get the WWE to where it's at today. Which one is right? Which one is wrong? What's true? What's false? None of it matters because it's all perspective. You can't deny that the WWE is bigger, even bigger since CM Punk came back. That CM Punk has been an incredibly positive contribution to WWE and to WWE programming. Every match CM Punk has been in has been a huge match. I'm sure that he's helped every ticket sales to every arena that he's stepped foot in. Getting eyeballs on every show that he's on, especially when he's wrestling on these premium live events. But at the same time, it doesn't take away from the 10 years of work that Seth Rollins and the people around Seth Rollins did to get WWE to the point that they could truly be a place where CM Punk could make that kind of difference. If WWE sucks and CM Punk comes back, it's cool that Punk's back, but what is there for him to do now? Just a moment ago, I listed 5 dream matches that Punk could have whenever he wants, and that's because of how strong WWE is right now. But I want it all to continue, man. I mean, I want it to get as personal can be. And it's tough because the Drew McIntyre CM Punk thing was so personal that Seth can't repeat that. Seth has to be a completely different foe to CM Punk than Drew McIntyre was. I think Seth is very, very capable of doing that. Seth, even on Monday, when it was made official that this match is happening at Netflix Raw, the two of them going back and forth, CM Punk getting so much off of his chest. Seth, I would have loved to have heard a little bit more from Seth, but I think we'll have opportunity to do all that. But I like that they're not shying away from the physicality. There's no sort of let's have them not touch until... No, this is one of them that these two hate each other so much that you get them anywhere near each other, it's going to be hands. And the visual of the two of them fighting in the middle of TD Garden was awesome. Then you get to the Wednesday press conference and Seth coming out, not even picking up a microphone, not even playing the game. CM Punk playing the game a little bit, talking about how happy he was at WWE, talking about the company, being that sort of ambassador that I think he always wanted to be. You go back through the history of CM Punk, he always wanted to be this guy. That was his frustration, that the WWE wasn't putting him in a position to be this guy. He wanted to be in the main event, but he wanted to be the guy that had the company on his shoulders. He wanted the opportunity to try and do that. Now he has that opportunity, and he's doing a hell of a job. Seth Rollins, on the other hand, is coming out. He won't even touch a microphone. He's calling CM Punk, who's the bootlicker now? Who's the bootlicker now? and bringing up stuff that is maybe in CM Punk's past that CM Punk is trying to put behind him. CM Punk is a forward-moving human being, but Seth Rollins won't let him forget about his past, and that's that guiding light of this rivalry. That CM Punk is regardless of what he's done before, going, this is who I am today, and this is how I'd like to contribute. And Seth Rollins goes, that's all well and good, but guess what? I am your past, and I'm here to haunt you. You know, it was CM Punk, as a matter of fact, who once said that the apology must be as loud and public as the disrespect. And when CM Punk said that, I think he was coming from a very real place. And of course, this is storyline, but everything counts in the modern age, and storyline and reality get completely blurred. Maybe that's what Seth Rollins is asking for from CM Punk. Seth Rollins is asking for CM Punk. I think on the bigger level, Seth Rollins is asking CM Punk to respond for everything that he said about WWE while he was gone. And I think that that's, completely within reason. But I think what makes this juicy, what makes this really interesting, is that in reality, Seth Rollins wants atonement for what Punk did to Seth. That yes, Seth Rollins didn't like what Punk said while Punk was gone, but in reality, Seth Rollins didn't like that Punk ghosted him. In reality, Seth Rollins didn't like that he called CM Punk a friend, and when CM Punk went away, Punk stopped talking to him. And Punk is going like, oh, I'm so sorry. Like it's so great. And that's what I mean about coming from a place of like real human emotions. That's why we can relate to all of this so well. I hope that because this is personal, I hope CM Punk brings out the absolute worst in Seth Rollins. I hope that it gets very personal. I hope it gets very bitter. I hope that Seth Rollins, and of course I'm talking about these characters. I'm not talking about the human beings. I hope the human beings do great business and provide a great living for their family. But these characters, I hope that venom, a real venom, comes out in Seth Rollins. Because what's interesting about all of this is CM Punk is so beloved by wrestling fans that Seth Rollins is saying all of this about Punk. And no fans are denying that it's true. Fans are going like, yeah, I mean, I guess you're right, but how great is it to see Punk again? Plus, look what he's doing now. He's doing right by us now, so it's all good. And Seth's going, it's not all good. And the fans are like, well, we think it is, so we're going to cheer him. And they're cheering CM Punk. And in turn, I think they're going to naturally boo Seth Rollins. I don't see CM Punk being a villain anytime soon. I mean, he's been back for a year, so after this Seth Rollins story, if he wants to go villain, but CM Punk would actually have to really do something to become a villain. And if he did something, people would boo him, because we are finally in an era where people are cheering the good guy and booing the bad guy. But when it comes down to just a judgment, because both are coming from a logical place, we're going to cheer who we like better. And we're very excited to see CM Punk. Every time he's on television, it's like, I'm like, how cool is it that CM Punk is here and CM Punk is back? And that's got to drive a character like Seth Rollins absolutely insane. Seth, I mean, it's interesting because Seth is coming from a similar perspective as Drew McIntyre, that Seth doesn't have to turn. Seth doesn't have to do anything. Seth staying with the same belief that he's always had is going to naturally make him the villain here. Seth is the reality check to all the fans loving CM Punk that Drew McIntyre is to all the fans loving the Bloodline. That's what makes both these characters so interesting, is that Seth Rollins is right, but every arena that he walks into, he's not only got to deal with the fact that CM Punk is here, but he's got to deal with the fact that all the fans are cheering for CM Punk. And Drew McIntyre is not wrong, but he not only has to deal with the fact that the OG Bloodline is still prospering, but he has to deal with the fact that fans are now completely cheering for the OG Bloodline. And it's one of those things that a person has got to be like, what, am I nuts? What I'm saying is right. And the fans are like, yeah, what you're saying is right. But what difference does it possibly make? It's not going to stop fans from loving good guys. But it will add permanence to what happens week to week. All of this just makes it so that everything that happens on these television shows counts. That just because fans start cheering you doesn't mean that I'm going to go, okay, Punk's back and he's cool. No. That if this isn't dealt with on television, I'm not stopping. This is going to be dealt with on television. I mean, we're seeing that with American Alpha or Alpha Academy and American Made. People said that the Gable Otis thing was done. They just blew off Otis after the Wyatt 6. But here we are with the seeds being planted again for Alpha Academy and American Made to be, and who knows where that's going to pan out. Maybe we'll finally do Gable versus Otis. Maybe that'll be on Netflix Raw. Maybe it'll be at Saturday Night's Main Event. Who knows where it's going to happen? But it feels like they're inching towards that again because that was never resolved. And just because it wasn't resolved when you thought it was going to be resolved doesn't mean it's not going to be resolved. And that's what we've got here, right? That CM Punk got injured. So the stuff that he and Rollins had was put on the back burner for a moment. But that doesn't mean that once CM Punk is done with Drew McIntyre, that thing on the back burner has gone away. It's always been here, and it will always continue to be here. It's really cool. It's a really cool thing, and it leads you to that question. What's going to main event Netflix Raw? So that's been brought up a lot. People want to know what is going to be the actual main event of the first Monday Night Raw on Netflix, right? You had CM Punk versus Seth Rollins was announced at the Netflix Raw kickoff press conference. Michael Cole said the main event for this Raw is going to be the most anticipated match of all time, CM Punk versus Seth Rollins. But since then, people have kind of wondered, when you say main event, do you mean last match or do you mean the thing that's just being advertised as the main event? Because it's getting very tricky, right? Already for Netflix Raw, you've got Liv Morgan versus Rhea Ripley. You've got Seth Rollins versus CM Punk. You've got Solo Sikoa versus Roman Reigns in Tribal Combat. All three of those matches would easily main event any Raw. They could also main event just about any pay-per-view at this point. A premium live event, if you will. So the fact that those three matches are all happening on Raw does lead you to question, what's going to main event this show? For me, we had this question, I think when it was really like, let's think about this. The last time was, I want to say, Bad Blood in October. When it's like, you've got Roman and Cody versus Solo and Jacob, but you've also got CM Punk versus Drew McIntyre inside Hell in a Cell. And I said, the week before Bad Blood, you got to do the Hell in a Cell match as the main event. And they didn't. But why didn't they? Because of the finish. Because The Rock coming back. And if you had told me The Rock was going to stand in the entranceway, put his 3 fingers up, slit his throat, and walk out, then I would tell you, no, that's not how you open a pay-per-view. That's how you close one. No, that if I had a Hell in a Cell match, I would not want to follow The Rock making a surprise return. No, that should be how you end the show. So that's kind of where I'm at with Netflix Raw. Every part of me, and maybe it's because it's the Bloodline, and maybe it's because of how we've been conditioned to view the Bloodline. But it's hard for me to imagine that Roman Reigns versus Solo Sikoa in Tribal Combat for the Ula Fala would not be the main event / last match of the first Monday Night Raw on Netflix. But if you told me that's going to be the match they put at 10 o'clock or 9 o'clock or however long this show is going to be, and the last match is going to be Seth Rollins versus CM Punk, I would get that too. I think that the question is not which story deserves the main event more. The question is, what's the finish? That's it. To me, that's the only thing that matters. Like, both of those matches could be in the main event of this show. But what's the finish? Especially because it's a Monday Night Raw. And what's going to be the goal for week 1 of Monday Night Raw on Netflix is to get as many sets of eyeballs as you can on Netflix. Raw being on the biggest streamer in the world is an amazing thing because now more people have access to this show simultaneously than ever before. And you've got the ability to put this show on for new people and pick up new fans. However, the people who are traditional television viewers will not find it as easily. If something's on Netflix, you have to go click on Netflix, click on the show, and decide to watch the show. Even when you've decided to go on to Netflix, how many of us have lost ourselves scrolling and watching those 30-second previews of every single show? I mean, I've spent full nights figuring out what I'm going to watch on Netflix and then realize it's time to go to bed. So you have to go like, it's Monday night, I'm turning on Netflix. The goal of episode 1 is going to be to get as many people as you can across the entire globe to decide to push the Netflix button so they can watch this show. As soon as that show is done, the minute it ends, what is the next goal? To get people to click Netflix again the next Monday. You have to develop a new habit with viewers. You have to make it so that it's second nature, that if it is Monday and it is 8 p.m. Eastern in the United States, whatever time it is around you, I'm turning on Netflix so I can watch Raw. And how do you do that over the course of several weeks? You have to make it can't miss. So to me, I think it's essential that the end of the show be something that makes you want to watch the next show. Either a cliffhanger or a moment so big that you go, I can't wait to see what they do next. So where does that cliffhanger lie? I think when I look at Roman and Solo and when I look at Punk and Rollins, I'm not convinced that either one of those matches is the last time that match happens. If one of those matches has finality to it, it's probably going to be Roman and Solo. Because there's more for Roman to move off into, and I don't think that the Punk Rollins story, all we've done is scratch the surface on. We're not ready to move on to the next thing for Punk after one match with Seth Rollins. So, but all that said, if the story moving forward is Drew McIntyre and the Bloodline, if you've got The Rock showing up, then Tribal Combat should conclude the night. But if the story moving forward is whatever's going to happen with Punk and Rollins, however you figure out that finish that leads you someplace else, whether it's a CM Punk loss, whether it's whatever it is, maybe that should be the one. But to me, I feel like it's very, very simple. What main events Netflix Raw should be whatever is going to convince people the most when that show goes off that, man, I want to see this show next week. That's it. It's not a conversation about, well, who's the biggest star? It's not a conversation about, well, what match do you want to see the most? It's not a conversation about, well, who deserves it the most? It's simply a conversation about what scenario is going to put us in a situation where people are like, yep, I'll tell you what I'm doing next Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern. I'm pushing my Netflix button one more time. Now, at the same time, with all the stars that are on Raw and all the emphasis that's being put on Raw, they made the announcement this week. Apparently, Smackdown is going to go 3 hours. Now, that makes you wonder because people have been with the transfer window open. It's almost like you wonder if Netflix is going to get all the big stars, right? But if SmackDown's going to be 3 hours on a regular basis, you're going to need a lot of stars to fill up that 3 hours as well. Now, luckily, WWE's roster is loaded right now from a talent perspective and from a story perspective. But what are you going to do there? You know, are you going to, in hindsight, are you going to make it so that the Bloodline has multiple stories like they kind of are now and have some of the Bloodline on Raw and some of the Bloodline on SmackDown? Are you going to have Cody on Raw, but CM Punk moves to SmackDown? Imagine that. I mean, if that's one way to do it, you know, if you want to separate Punk and Rollins stays on Raw, Punk goes to SmackDown. Maybe Cody goes to Raw, Gunther goes to SmackDown. Punk starts something with Gunther over on SmackDown? I mean, there are different things you could do. You also have to wonder if they're going to take two different approaches to the shows, right? I mean, when that brand split first happened and Paul Heyman was in charge of SmackDown, SmackDown was a completely different show from Monday Night Raw. Monday Night Raw was more moments. SmackDown was more matches, but I do think that is, it simplifies things too much because SmackDown was also full of moments. Like SmackDown was focused on stories that were surrounding people who had 5-star matches 10 times out of 10 and people that were looking for a shot to be top guys that weren't necessarily getting it. You know, SmackDown became more full of people who we as fans knew were capable of it, who we as fans knew could be world champion, and weren't getting the opportunity on Raw just because the top of the card was so full. And that's how we ended up in scenarios that resulted in Edge going as far as he did, Rey Mysterio going as far as he did, Eddie Guerrero becoming a world champion, JBL getting to fully form JBL. If SmackDown wasn't the landscape that it was, JBL was a member of the Acolyte Protection Agency, and he had to completely change his character. He would not have been able to become that major heel. I mean, Batista started on SmackDown. John Cena was able to have his rise on SmackDown, and maybe that's what SmackDown becomes, and I don't think that would be a bad thing. I'd be watching that. You know, as good as NXT has been, maybe that's kind of where you go. If we want to see people, and you know, where's Trick Williams going to go? The idea of Trick Williams and Carmelo Hayes going back at it, and that being a SmackDown thing, and knowing, well, if it happens on SmackDown, it's going to be a lot different than if it happens on Raw. I think that could be really good. I think that the idea of, if SmackDown's going to be 3 hours, and SmackDown's going to be on regular TV and Raw's going to be on Netflix, I really like the idea of SmackDown having a completely different feel than Monday Night Raw does. We'll see, but we won't have to wait long. It's only going to be a couple weeks, you know? And I talk about NXT, and I feel bad because we don't talk about NXT nearly enough on this show, but we're not, you know, if we were on every day, maybe we would. But there's something brewing in NXT right now that we have to address. Is Shawn Michaels going to wrestle again? I mean, I know there was always this thing, Shawn Michaels not going to wrestle again, but is Shawn Michaels going to wrestle again? Because if you haven't been watching, and you should be, because NXT is like one of the funnest wrestling shows that you could possibly watch. It's fast-paced. Everybody has a character. Everybody has a reason for being there. Everybody's got a story. And it doesn't always go exactly the way you think it's going to go. You know, they're always, that makes sense that would happen, but I didn't see it coming. So Eddie Thorpe, the arc that Eddie Thorpe has been on is absolutely fascinating. I can't wait to see where it goes this week, because it feels like we could get an Eddie Thorpe versus Shawn Michaels match in 2025. And I know this sounds crazy, but in terms of getting eyeballs on Eddie Thorpe and putting that guy in a good position, I couldn't imagine a better one. And in terms of getting eyeballs on NXT as the brand, I couldn't think of a better way to do that either. So here's how I got there. A couple weeks before Deadline, right? Deadline has the Iron Survivor Challenge. And the people that lost the qualifying matches in the Iron Survivor Challenge, Eddie Thorpe ended up losing his qualifier, but there was cheating involved, right? So Ava, the general manager, she goes up to everybody that lost their qualifying matches and says, next week there's going to be a fatal four-way, last chance qualifier. So the last spot goes to the winner. The fifth spot goes to the winner of the fatal four-way of the 4 people that lost their qualifiers. And everybody's like, okay, great. And Eddie Thorpe's like, well, shouldn't I just get in because my guy cheated? It wasn't fair what happened to me. And she moves on to another thing, and she's trying to leave. And Eddie Thorpe, he goes, Ava, no, I'm not done, Ava. And she's like, Eddie, I'm over it. Eddie Thorpe grabs Ava by the wrist. And she goes, get your hands off of me, Eddie. Don't ever do that. And while she's reprimanding him, somebody else over here who's having an argument pushes into the door knocks into Ava. Ava falls over. So Heartbreak Kid comes and he checks on Ava. And now people start going like, oh boy, Eddie Thorpe's going to have to fight The Rock. But there's no hint of The Rock coming in. But Shawn Michaels goes to check on Ava. He goes, what happened, Ava? And she goes, oh, there was a confusion. And Eddie Thorpe shows up, which, bro, like, you are not good at calling your shots. You need to get out of there. Let that settle without you. Hopefully they'll forget you existed. You come back next week, and maybe they won't remember it happened. But Eddie Thorpe gets involved right away, and Shawn Michaels shoves Eddie Thorpe, and he shoves him again, and he pushes him onto that loading dock garage door, you know, the metal thing, and he grabs him by his shirt, and he's pushing him. Don't put your hands on her. Don't put your hand. And he's pushing him. He tells him to get out of here. And Eddie Thorpe, he goes from like, whoa, 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 I just wanted to explain myself to, whoa, you're putting your hands on me. I'm angry now. And Shawn tells him to hit the bricks. And Eddie Thorpe walks away. But he's not happy. So Eddie Thorpe ends up going on to his fatal four-way. He ends up winning that fatal four-way to go on to Deadline. But at the end of that show, Eddie Thorpe gets jumped. And you're going, who jumped Eddie Thorpe? Some people are saying it was The Rock. Some people are saying it was Obafemi. I'm over here going like, how mad was Shawn Michaels really? But as it turns out, Eddie Thorpe goes to Ava. He goes, Ava, I got jumped. I was supposed to be in that match. Obafemi won it. Obafemi was in my spot. He's going to get a title match. I should get a title match. Ava's like, I feel bad you got jumped. We're still trying to figure out who jumped you. We don't know. We didn't install any security cameras whatsoever, so we don't know. But, okay, sign your name here. Okay, once you sign your name, it's ironclad. Eddie Thorpe signs his name. She goes, by the way, we're still going to try to find out who jumped you. And Eddie Thorpe's like, you don't need to. I did it. It was total fake, which is brilliant, by the way, that Eddie Thorpe pretended to get jumped to get himself out of the match and then get a world title match anyway. I thought I loved that move on Eddie Thorpe's part. But then on NXT on Tuesday, we see the match happen, right? And it ends in a double pin where Trick has him down, but Eddie Thorpe's got his arm over his chest. All four shoulders are down. 1, 2, 3. And the match ends. And in a YouTube video, this happened after the show went off the air, Ava tells the referee, in the case of a double pin, the champion retains the title. You have to beat the champion by pinfall or submission. If there's a draw, disqualification, count out, the champion obviously is going to keep their title. And Eddie Thorpe is pissed. Eddie Thorpe starts yelling right in Ava's face. He gets right in Ava's face. So once again, Shawn Michaels comes out from gorilla position, and he tells Eddie Thorpe to back off. This time, Eddie pushes Shawn. Eddie Thorpe pushes Shawn Michaels. The title of the YouTube video is something to the effect of Eddie Thorpe shoves Shawn Michaels. Trick Williams gets him from behind, gets his revenge, puts Eddie Thorpe down, but people start chanting HBK, HBK. We've now seen physicality on both sides. We've seen physicality from Shawn Michaels to Eddie. We've seen physicality from Eddie Thorpe to Shawn. We've heard the crowd chanting. We've seen this YouTube video come out. What are we doing? Is Shawn Michaels going to wrestle again? Because if it's Eddie Thorpe versus Shawn Michaels, I'm in. If somehow you can find a tag team partner for Eddie Thorpe, maybe a Ridge Holland, and you do, or even a All Ego. All Ego is having a hell of an arc. The way All Ego put Javon Evans in the dirt. Maybe it's All Ego teaming with Eddie Thorpe versus Shawn Michaels and Trick Williams. Maybe it's Ridge Holland and Eddie Thorpe versus Shawn Michaels and Trick Williams. However you want to do it. I'm okay with the tag match too, if that's the best, you know. Because, by the way, Trick Williams getting to be tag team partners with Shawn Michaels. I would call Trick Williams the Triple H, not the Marty Jannetty. It's just probably a better spot to be in. But, yeah, either way, if you can figure this out, I only see upside. I don't think Shawn should do this every year. I think this being a one-off, you can tell a hell of a story. You can build up to, he's not really going to do it. He's not really going to do it. You can have Shawn going around doing interviews going like, no, I'm never going to wrestle. But, yeah, there have been problems. And get it to the point where he goes, all right, screw it. I'm wrestling. You sell a lot of tickets. You get a lot of eyeballs on the product. The build-up, you'll get a lot of eyeballs on television. Then you do the PLE on Peacock. They'll be happy. I mean, it seems like winning across the board. See a triumphant return of Shawn Michaels. Now, if it's a singles match, it would be a bummer because Shawn Michaels kind of has to lose. But if it's a tag match, Shawn can win. Trick Williams can get the pin. They can play the Heartbreak Kids music to send them out and then have that mold into Whoop That Trick. And Shawn can kind of really, like, Put it all on Trick Williams then, while giving a spotlight to the heels as well. I think a tag match is probably a win across the board, but man, a singles match would be great too. Look, I'm wildly speculating. I have no idea. But can you imagine? Can you imagine if 2025 gives us a Shawn Michaels match in NXT? I'm probably putting the cart way in front of the horse. It's just what I'm reading into as I watch the show. It's just what I want. It's what I want to see. And that's what we talk about here on Notsam Wrestling. I'd love to hear what you want to see. And we have that ability to do just that. All you have to do is email in. You can email us, notsamwrestling@gmail.com. notsamwrestling@gmail.com is our email address. Let's go to Tyler. Tyler says, Tyler emailed last week about the Heels Champions. I just wanted to write back in after my question on last week's show about the majority of champions being heel. I follow all 3 rules of Not Sam Wrestling, but did not follow the unwritten rule of thinking about my question before I asked it. Okay. You don't ever have to send an email. I appreciate every email. So even if your email gets blasted, I'm glad you sent it. You don't ever have to, This is coming in from John. I grew up in my teen years watching the Attitude Era with Austin, Rock, Mick Foley, etc. He wrote Dude Love in parentheses. I know who Mick Foley is. But left it behind as I got older and life happened. I kept this email all that time, though, because Mick Foley is the man. I kept this. His email is Dude Love. Oh, okay. This year, I have reconnected with the product due to WrestleMania 40 and my daughter getting into wrestling due to Liv Morgan. That's awesome, dude. I love that story. That's so cool. Her story with Dominic Mysterio and the genuine connection she has with Dominic and the audience as a heel is so underappreciated amongst the hardcore fan base from what I have noticed reading forums and watching YouTube channels. I don't think it gets mentioned enough, if that's what you're getting at. I definitely don't think it gets mentioned enough how good Liv Morgan has been this year, how good Liv and Dom are together. The fact that Dominic and Rhea Ripley were an inseparable item. The idea that Dominic and Rhea would split made people clutch their chest because of how good Rhea and Dominic were together. And Dom and Liv together has made people not even remember that they were worried about it. It's on a different level. Liv Morgan showed up in the Royal Rumble at the beginning of this year. She is a different human being. At Saturday night's main event, when Liv Morgan and Rhea Ripley stared down each other, they were 1,000% equals. That wasn't the case at the beginning of the year. The only reason that is true is because of all the work that Liv Morgan put in this year. And Liv Morgan is connecting like very few people ever connect. It's amazing the year that Liv Morgan has had. Liv Morgan, to me, in a way, saved the Raw WWE women's division with all the injuries and retirements that occurred to the top players. I mean, she did rise up the ranks real fast when there needed to be top players. It seems like they're taking the belt from her and putting it on Rhea Ripley. I don't know. But Rhea's the female Stone Cold Steve Austin. She doesn't need the title. Just have her go out and obliterate everyone. You get pops galore. So with Rhea as champion again, it is a roadblock for Liv. So what other options do you think WWE have? Well, here's the other thing. She could go to SmackDown, Liv Morgan, if Rhea were to take the title. It all depends on what's next, and if the idea is that Becky Lynch is going to come back, or Charlotte Flair is going to come back, or they're both going to come back, or whoever is going to come in. I don't know. I don't know what the plan is next and whether it makes more sense for Liv Morgan to have the title or Rhea Ripley to have the title. I would argue that Liv Morgan has rised up the ranks so much that you're not wrong that Rhea Ripley without the title is as big a star as Rhea Ripley with the title. I might argue that if Liv Morgan were to lose the title, she would not lose any of her star power. I would argue that Liv Morgan has made the title has not made Liv Morgan. And that Liv Morgan can absolutely lose that match to Rhea Ripley and move on to the next thing. And if the next thing even has a little bit of meat on the bone, she's going to be able to take advantage of that, make it compelling, and she'll do just fine because she's extraordinary. So I don't think you have anything to worry about. And I don't even really think that that's how we should look at wrestling. That's not how I like to look at wrestling as a fan, you know, going like, oh, well, this one deserves to win or doesn't deserve to win. What's the story? It's not about, you don't win matches because you deserve to win matches. It's what's the story? What are we watching for? What happens next? This person is winning this match because this is happening next. What is happening next? We'll answer why this is happening today. Andy writes in, let me just start by saying, I love you, my PTC.
I love you, Solo.
Instead of fantasy booking and getting ripped apart, I will ask you, what would you do with the New Day? Should they go after the War Raiders and have the gold, or should they just keep being a menace to themselves and others? Would the titles boost them, or do they even need them? I go back and forth. Secondly, I was watching Raw with my 6-year-old last week. That's amazing. And after the Judgment Day segment, he turned to me and said, "Daddy, what's a chicken tender slut?" Oh, no. You can't let these kids stay up that late. You got to show them the edited. You got to watch it first. Before you show your kid the thing, you got to watch it, because otherwise you're going to need to explain to them what a chicken tender slut is. I almost spit out my drink. He was playing with his Legos. I didn't think he was paying attention. I was able to divert the combo, but it was funny nonetheless, because you're screwed. Because if your kid asks you, what's a chicken tender slut? And you say, oh, it's just somebody that really likes chicken tenders. And they go, okay, you're going to think you've diverted that conversation. All right, I handled that. I'm a great parent, but you haven't. You know why? Because I promise you, they're going to go to school the next day. And the teacher's going to be like, oh, what'd you have for lunch? And your child is going to say, I'm kind of a chicken tender slut myself, so I'm going to have chicken tenders. You don't want that. Because if the definition is it's somebody that likes chicken tenders, guess what? That applies to every kid. So if you tell your kid chicken tender slut is somebody that likes chicken tenders a lot, they're going to say it. They're 100% going to say it. They're going to be on the playground. And they're going to say, I'm a bit of a chicken tender slut. What can I say? And then their parent of their friend is going to come to you and go, excuse me, my son or daughter came home from school describing themselves as a chicken tender slut. They said they learned it from you. And you're going to have to say the Eradicator taught it to me. And it's going to be a mess. So, watch the show before your kid watches the show. And then fast forward the chicken tender slut parts. I think that's fair. I think that's okay. Hey, Sam, this is from Cade. Hope the family is well, and I acknowledge you as my OPTC.
I love you, Solo.
My question is, do you think we could see Kevin versus Cody at the Royal Rumble match? And the match could be like Punk versus Cena Money in the Bank 2011. For example, we could have Cody return as Kevin is acting like the champion, and Cody challenges him at the Rumble for the title. The winner is the real champion. That's all. I mean, I don't think it's exactly like that, because Kevin is not an interim champion. He's just claiming he's the champion. So, when John Cena won the title as an interim championship, and then Punk came back. So Kevin injuring the champion and then holding the Winged Eagle title hostage is not the same scenario at all. So it wouldn't be the same scenario, because Cody would not say, well, let's find out who the real champion is. Cody's like, I already know who the real champion is. I won. I beat you. So I'm the real champion. Cody should not say, let's find out who the real champion is. Cody already knows who the real champion is. It's definitely him. I do think that Kevin versus Cody is a match that we could see at the Royal Rumble. I think that'd be a great match at the Royal Rumble. And I think that Kevin could position it as, I've already got the Winged Eagle title, and I'm taking the one that you have as well. But Cody would say, like, well, my plan is to beat you, and I'll just keep wearing the one that I have, if that's okay. I think that that's really the direction to go in. But how brilliant is it that they bring back the Winged Eagle title, and instead of it just being like a prop for the night, it's actually played into story, because now Kevin actually does have a championship that he can hold on to, and that when Cody does come back, they can each have championships. In any other scenario, it wouldn't have worked. Avik writes in, Sam, what's the haps from London? Rapid fire for 2025 men's Royal Rumble, mine or below. What's yours? Number 1, Seth, surprise, Cardona, legend, X-Pac, winner, Roman Reigns. Okay. Number 1, I think Jey Uso was number 1 last year, right? Number 1, let's go Jacob. Let's put Jacob Fatu in. No. You know what? Maybe number 1 is Punk and number 2 is Drew. I like that. Number 1 is Punk and number 2 is Drew. Surprise. Who's out there? Are call-ups surprises? Because if a call-up is a surprise, Obafemi. And I might add to that. Call-up / Kane spot / Diesel spot, I'll give to Obafemi. Surprise. I mean, Cardona's kind of the obvious one, right? It's kind of the easy one. Maybe Ricky Starks. That might be somebody that you could say is a surprise, right? Legend. You already said X-Pac. That would be a really, really good one. Legend, I'll say Greg the Hammer Valentine. We saw him at Saturday Night's main event. He was looking like $1 million. I might take him to win the whole thing, but Greg the Hammer Valentine is my legend. And then winner, you've got Roman Reigns. If not Roman Reigns, maybe Punk. Maybe Punk is the winner. You know, I don't mind that. What if Punk and Drew are number 1 and 2, and Punk and Drew are also the last 2? And then Punk eliminates Drew, and he's the winner. Yeah. Could be. That was just quick, so I don't know. Joe writes in, Sam, hope you're well. I'm so well. 1, listen to your Netflix Raw kickoff reaction. Please, no more Rhea versus Morgan after January 6th. You have a point that their thing should be done prior to Mania. Yeah, I think that I'm not going to say I would not like to see that ever happen again. I think that's one of those rivalries that you could dip back into throughout. You know what I mean? It's never going to go away. They're not going to be cool after that. But I do think that after this match, the next story begins for both of them. And 2, off topic, but I appreciate that your content into ad breaks have seamless audio volume and quality. Your pod is definitely not a slop shop. Don't ever listen to a slop shop, okay? Never listen to a slop shop. They're for losers. Thank you. Matthew writes in, happy holidays, my OPTC. I love the throwback vibe of Saturday Night's main event, but I wanted to ask you if you think WWE might ever bring back the old WWF logo for these events. It's just such a nostalgic piece of wrestling history, and I feel it would take the show to a whole new level for me. If not, I would prefer the current WWE logo over the modified WWF logo without the F for these events. No, I mean, it's a legal thing. They're not WWF because they can't be. You know, there's another WWF. It's a whole legal thing. They had to get the F out, you know, and I think that this is a substitute for it, but I think as much as I would love to see the real old school logo, it's not meant to be, and the substitute works for me better than just, like, I wouldn't want them to not change the turnbuckles to navy blue with the logo. I like the old logo, and so I like to, at least there's an homage to it. John writes in, Johnny G from Boston, who's a Day 1 O&A listener, my guy, hello to the professional tribal broadcaster and chief. Appreciate that. 3 quick ones. No Ultimate War Games 2024. Yeah, I would love to do it. I think Ultimate is on hiatus, but I do think that there'll be a lot more digital stuff, hopefully, in 2025. I think they're recalibrating everything, hopefully. 2, does Obafemi get the Kane spot in the Rumble this year? 1 email, too late. And 3, have you been to a WWE show in Lowell, Mass? Sneaky good wrestling town. I'm trying to think, because Lowell is where NXT was this week. And that venue, I love that venue. That's where DX did the Merry Xmas thing. That's where Shawn lost his smile. I don't know if I've ever been to a Lowell, Mass wrestling show, but that might be one that I'd like to do. I feel like I've been to Lowell before, okay? I spent a lot of time in Boston. I spent a lot of time in Duxbury. I love Massachusetts. The whole vibe. I really do I love the New England vibe. I love Massachusetts. I don't, nothing's coming to me, but maybe a family member or something will be like, no, we went to that show in Lowell. I know there was an NXT house show that I went to. I feel like it was in Massachusetts. It was not in that venue. It was back when like NXT first went on the road. And I think they did like one in Albany and then one in Massachusetts like a day or two later. And I don't remember if that was Lowell or not. I'd have to look it up. But good suggestion. Slim writes in, "Hey, Sam, my podcast tribal chief. I acknowledge you. I appreciate that. I'm not going to play the drop again. I'm writing into the show from St. Vincent and the Grenadines. I hope I said that right. Starting with the match now. And I appreciate you, though, writing in from St. Vincent. Leading up to, he's talking about tribal combat. Leading up to the match. Oh, you're fantasy booking. Okay, Slim. Okay, here we go. Leading up to the match, Adam Pearce outlined to both Solo and the OG tribal chief that members of their bloodline are not allowed at ringside. For Solo, no Tama and no Jacob Fatu. I know who is in the bloodline. I know. I know you team with Punk. And then for Roman, do the same with Jay. No Sammy, no Jimmy. He said, I know you team with Punk, so no Punk either. You guys both agreed. Match starts. Both guys trade move sets. Move set. Coming to the end of the match, Roman is in control. He gets in position to deliver his spear. The Rock comes from under the ring. Rock ain't coming from no under the ring, okay? No way is The Rock coming out. First of all, The Rock's not hanging out under the ring for the whole show. Second of all, The Rock ain't coming out without an entrance. Third of all, it's a Versace vest. You're not going to sully that by getting it dusty under the ring. Rock ain't coming from no under the ring. Rock comes from under the ring and holds his leg like how Punk did to McIntyre on Raw. Roman gets distracted. Solo hits Roman with a spear of his own and a spike. Roman 1, 2, 3. Solo wins. No. The Rock enters the ring and Solo places the Ulafala around the Rock's neck. No. And acknowledges the Rock as the true tribal chief. That's dumb. Roman is shocked and pissed and leads to the Rock versus Roman at WrestleMania. No, I mean, if you're going to do that, number one, I already set this up last week, okay? I'm not doing this again. I told you Roman can win the match, get the Ulafala that says he's the tribal chief. Rock comes out with a white and gold Ulafala, and he says, I'm the high chief. That's better than the tribal chief. I'm still in charge. Or Rock can interfere, still be the high chief with the grand Ulafala on that's white and gold, and beat down Roman Reigns for not being able to take it, and then say, now not only will you have to take the Ulafala from Solo, you're going to have to take it from me. And then Roman now has to beat Solo on the way to WrestleMania and then beat The Rock at WrestleMania. But you definitely don't have him come out from under the ring. You don't have him hold his foot. You don't have to do any of that nonsense. If The Rock is back, give him an entrance. He doesn't even have to get physical. Give him an entrance. That's enough of a distraction. And then have him come out and by the way, win or lose, we've got a scenario for Roman versus The Rock if that's where we want to go. And it's not Rock under the ring. I'm very offended by that. Katie writes in. Hi, Sam. Do you think Naomi took out Jade? 100% I do. It seems like she's moved on, that she had motive. Bayley became part of the Survivor Series team, and now Naomi has a championship. Oh, Naomi was so quick to go, Bianca, you need a partner? 100%. I said, if you want to figure out who did that to Jade Cargill, who jumped her and threw her on the hood of a car, figure out who benefits the most from that. Naomi, 100%. It's Naomi. Yes, I do believe that is who did it. Tyler writes in, Sam, not Sam. How do you feel about Logan Paul versus Gunther as the main event of 125 Saturday night's main event? I think NBC would benefit from the audience Paul brings, and it would allow the loser to be in the Rumble match the following Saturday. It doesn't work for me. I think Logan should be in the Rumble regardless. I mean, you could do it, but but I guess there's enough build. You could start the build at Netflix Raw, right? And that guy gives you 3 weeks to build up to Gunther versus Logan Paul. I mean, I'm not totally against it, but it doesn't jump out to me immediately. Let's go to Joe. He writes in, I love you.
I love you, Solo.
My podcast tribal chief. I just have some predictions for WrestleMania. Oh, good. I'm glad, Joe. On the way there, Seth Rollins wins the title from Gunther at the next Saturday night's main event. That's interesting. Okay, see? And I had Punk winning the Rumble just now. So if Seth wins the title, then you go, that's how, maybe you do whatever you do with Seth and Punk. You don't really touch it at all. Like, you do Seth versus Punk at Saturday night's main event. I mean, at Netflix Raw. And then you move on to something else. And then Seth beats Gunther. And then Punk wins the Royal Rumble. And now we're back to Seth versus Punk. That's one way you could do it. Roman wins the Rumble, okay. Punk cashes in his favor to enter and eventually win the Elimination Chamber, maybe with the OG. That makes no sense. Why would Paul Heyman be able to put people in the Elimination Chamber? The favor cannot be Paul Heyman can just do whatever he wants. That makes no sense. Punk cashes in his favor to enter and eventually win the Elimination Chamber, maybe with OG Bloodline help. Other entrants definitely include Kevin Owens, Drew McIntyre, maybe even Jacob Fatu. So one main event is Seth versus Punk. Then The Rock turns the Roman Cody into a three-way. Not predicting Mania winners, sadly, have left out John Cena. Also, wouldn't it be great if the inaugural Women's Intercontinental Championship match was a surprise ladder match? Considering the first ever WWE ladder match was for the Intercontinental title. I mean, I guess, sure. But I think that there are some flaws. Like, how could the favor be I get to be in the Elimination Chamber? How could Paul Heyman have that power? Paul Heyman's never put anybody in the Elimination Chamber. He's Roman Reigns' wise man. He's a special counsel. He's a tribal chief. So, like, I think that the more interesting thing would be Roman Reigns wins the Royal Rumble and Paul Heyman makes Roman Reigns give his WrestleMania match to CM Punk. And then you could do Roman Reigns versus The Rock and CM Punk versus whoever. Rollins, Cody, whatever you want to do. And then that way you still have a world title match open for John Cena if you wanted to do it that way. I mean, I like putting the favor into our fantasy bookings. I have no problem with that. But it has to be logic. Like, if you're telling me Punk cashed in his favor and he gets to win the Elimination Chamber, how would Paul Heyman get that done? If you can explain to me how Paul Heyman got that done, then we can talk. All right. Okay, this is the last email. And it's about the favor. Okay. Sam, Wes here, longtime listener, first-time emailer. This is perfect for a last email. Love the show, and I love you. I'm not going to play the drop again. I almost did. I figured this is a long shot, but a fun idea regardless. Okay. With the emphasis on factions over the last couple years, what if CM Punk recognizes this, and the favor that he asks of Paul Heyman is for him to use his connections to help him form a faction of his own, sort of like a Shield 2.0? CM Punk would be the leader. Paul could be its wise man, and the faction could even feature one or more yet-to-be-debuted members of the Anoa'i family, like Lance, who's in NXT. Doing this could further build tension between Punk and Roman and maybe lead to a faction clash later in 2025. Why would CM Punk need Paul Heyman's help to build a faction? That says to me that CM Punk has no friends. CM Punk should have no problem building a faction. What new superstar would not want to be in a faction with somebody as great as CM Punk? Now, if the favor is at any point you have to leave Roman and come manage me, maybe that's something. But Paul Heyman helps him build a faction that's not a favor. I mean, this favor has to be a one-time action, and it has to be something that CM Punk couldn't do on his own. If I came to CM Punk and was like, look, if you do this for me, I'll help you build a faction. CM Punk would go, I can build my own faction. I mean, I'm at the Performance Center all the time. I'll do another email. Keep emailing in, though, bud. Okay, Micah's writing in. Feel free to roast my idea. Oh, thank you for the permission. But it looks like the Judgment Day is close to imploding. It does look like that. It has looked like that before, but it really looks like that now. And I'm okay with that, but I'd like for the group to last till WrestleMania. That's a long time, dude. That's January, February, March, 8th. That's 4 more months. WrestleMania is not until the 20th of April. 4 more months of teetering on implosion. That's a long time. My reasoning is I'd like the Judgment Day versus Wyatt 6 match at WrestleMania. Come on. The Wyatts have one less female superstar in their group, so it could be a good time for Alexa Bliss to return. Plus, the Judgment Day has become a dysfunctional family. Okay, I'm going to do another one. Pedro writes in, Hola, Sam. I acknowledge the podcast tribal chief. Thank you. What if The Rock wrestles someone other than Roman? At this point, I'm not sure The Rock's return isn't for a while. Bloodline's cooking without him. What if there's a Bloodline Elimination Chamber match with all Bloodline? Okay. Winner takes on Rock at Mania. Solo wins because of Jacob. It's Solo versus Rock at Mania. All right, I'm doing another email. Sorry, dude. Let's see. Okay, Melissa. You got this, Melissa. You got this. Melissa here, frequent listener and big fan of your work. But Sam, my podcast tribal chief, we need to talk. Oh, I love you coming in hostile like this, Melissa. I was listening to your December 16th podcast, and you said the story of the Bloodline is the story of the French Revolution, and I lost my damn mind. Oh, my God, Melissa, you coming at me combative and wanting to talk about the Bloodline is like music to my ears. You know my love language. Now, when I tell you the French Revolution is my wheelhouse, I mean it. I got an A++, 104 out of 100 in the Modern Revolutions course in college. Okay, I love this. I've seen Les Mis 3 times. That's kind of where we're at. I've been to France twice and visited every important revolutionary historical site. Revolution is my life. Melissa, me and you got to take a trip together. This is great. Do you mean to tell me that after all these years of watching the Bloodline saga unfold, that I wasn't seeing the Bloodline story is the story of the French Revolution reimagined in wrestling? Please, for my sanity, elaborate on this theory, because I've been so clearly blinded and need your help to see. Thank you so much, and happy holidays to you and your family, Melissa. Okay. All right. I thought of it in the moment, but here's where I'm coming from, okay? The French Revolution, and this is broad strokes. The French Revolution starts with this group that is in power in France, that is holding all the power to themselves and giving so little to the people beneath them that the people beneath them, they can't even survive. But the people in power don't look at that as their problem at all. They couldn't care less. They're having these elaborate parties. They're saying, let them eat cake, which I know they didn't actually ever say, let them eat cake. That's not the quote that Marie Antoinette ever said. I know. Don't come at me with your French Revolution knowledge, even though I feel like we're best friends. That's the Bloodline. That's the Bloodline for their first run-up, where they have all the power. Roman Reigns has both titles, and he doesn't care. When Roman Reigns does get both championships, he starts wrestling less. And the people on the roster that are lower down than him, that are like, we just want opportunity. He goes, not only am I not going to give you opportunity, when I do, one of the other Bloodline members is going to cheat. There's no movement for you. You can't come up. Now, in reality, of course, there is movement, but I'm talking about pure storyline, okay? The storyline is there can be no movement. You can never achieve this power. You can never get out of your position because we are keeping all of it for ourselves. And that's the Usos with both sets of tag titles. That's Roman with both sets of world titles, okay? Now, when they start to slip, that's when this French Revolution begins. That's when the people start to take over. That's when the executions start to happen. That's Drew McIntyre coming in and taking out Jimmy Uso even though he's on a crutch. That's Seth Rollins coming in. That's Kevin Owens coming in, right? Kevin Owens, Seth Rollins, Drew McIntyre all represent the people that decided we need to overthrow this government. And what happened when the people overthrew the government was we got a reign of terror. It was not a good time in France when the people got their power, because it became the reign of terror. They started executing people all the time. And anybody that didn't line up with their point of view, or anybody that seemed to show any little bit of loyalty to the people who were in charge before, were executed, were brought to the guillotine. And what's happening with Kevin Owens, with Seth Rollins, and with Drew McIntyre? Anybody that shows even a little bit of loyalty to the old guard, executed. Drew McIntyre is not only after Roman Reigns, he's after Sami Zayn and Jey Uso because they showed loyalty. He's disgusted by CM Punk. He's disgusted by Cody Rhodes. Kevin Owens, he literally wants to end Cody Rhodes' career. He wants to end Randy Orton's career. Why? Because Cody Rhodes teamed with Randy Orton, and that's not what we do anymore. Seth Rollins wants nothing to do with these guys. We're in the reign of terror right now. So what do we want? Do we want Napoleon to come in and finally get things straight? Is that what we need? Who's going to be that Napoleon? Because it ain't any of those three guys, because those three guys are the reign of terror. Maybe Napoleon turns out to be... No, it couldn't be CM Punk because CM Punk was aligned with the old guard. It would have to be somebody new. Who was Napoleon coming in? Or do we bring back the old guard and then it doesn't end the way the French Revolution ended? I don't know. But maybe somebody comes in and brings some sort of semblance, finally brings Adam Pearce some relief where the show isn't so hectic all the time. You know, it's almost like Solo Sikoa, even though he was associated with the original thing. It's maybe Jacob Fatu is our Napoleon. Maybe Jacob Fatu is the one that's going to put us all on the right track. That's possible. That's where I'm coming from, Melissa. You tell me if I'm wrong, okay? Most of my knowledge base is in wrestling. A little bit of French Revolution. But that's my thought. Hopefully you'll email again next week. Hopefully you guys have a tremendous holiday. I appreciate you guys riding with us. I can't tell you how much fun this is, how much fun it is to see this podcast grow, how much fun it is to hear from you guys every single week. It's just, it's a great time to talk about wrestling, and I'm so, I have so much gratitude that you guys allow me to do that every single week. Have a great holiday. We'll see you one more time, or unless, midweek I jump in here, but we got one more week before the end of the year. Let's make it count. Have a good one, everybody.